What's up, buddy? Welcome back. I'm Leon, the Paperback Maniac, coming at you with book review number 2 for Movie Mayhem. Today, we are taking a look at Out Are the Lights by Richard Laymon. Let me go ahead and show you guys the spine and the back cover. It was actually suggested to me in a recent comment that I begin showing the back covers of these books, and so here I am acquiescing, because, you know, I am amenable to suggestions. So, yeah. This is the first ever edition of this book. It was put out by New English Library in 1982. A U.S. edition from Warner Books subsequently followed that same year. Here we have an amazing cover image that sells the novel fairly well, in my opinion, and is fairly representative of the novel. Much, much better than the atrocious Warner Books edition that followed. In fact, Laymon often blamed terrible marketing as well as severe editing in the U.S. for his lack of success in his home country, and as one of the primary reasons why his career never really took off in the U.S. The same way that it did in the U.K. But yeah, this cover here is just further proof that the U.K. really got it. They understood the market. They weren't making any bones about what they were selling. They're basically stating here, yes, this is pulp trash, take it or leave it. And, you know, you got to respect that. You got to respect that. I will go ahead and read the synopsis from the back cover. Shrek the Vampire had been the first. The audience shuddered, screamed, and loved every moment. The man, hurled down a stairwell, had thudded to a splattered death. The girl, trapped and screaming, had died in a welter of blood as the vampire bit clean through her jugular. Shrek the Inquisitor had followed. Spiders dropped onto the naked, spread-eagled girl, crawling over her terrified, twitching flesh, while the tall, hooded figure loomed and leered over her. Shrek the Axeman was promised. The audiences, growing by the week, clamored for more. This was the horror series to end all horror series. Movie buffs especially admired the grainy, amateur look that must conceal true art. All great ghoulish fun. And after all, it was just make-believe, wasn't it? So, Fangoria magazine once wrote that reading a Richard Laymon novel is, quote-unquote, like watching a really dumb splatter flick. Now, while I find that statement to be a little harsh, reading this book made me realize that there's actually quite a lot of truth in that statement as well. Now, while he never admitted it, it's patently clear that Laymon was immensely influenced by the horror cinema of his time, not only in the extreme violence and sex that pervade his books, but also in the pacing and propulsion, too. So, you know, not all bad. So anyway, this book in particular, Out Are the Lights, that title comes from a poem from Edgar Allan Poe. Laymon was actually, very well read, despite what many may think. He actually has a master's, I believe. He had a master's in, like, literature or something. The poem, The Conqueror Worm, from which this title comes, basically uses a theater metaphor to posit that life is essentially a tragedy. And that ends in death. It's a tragedy, as all tragedies do, it ends in death, and that the only heroes of this particular tragedy are the worms that inevitably come with death. So, yeah, big optimist that Poe was. So, in this book, we begin by being introduced to a couple who are, let's see, I took some notes here, Connie and Dal. Now, Connie is deaf, purely out of convenience for a plot point that comes later in the book. And she is a writer of popular, racy historical fiction, or rape epics, as she calls them. And she's living with her boyfriend, Dal, who is a total lowlife and prick right from the beginning. This guy, Dal, doesn't have a whole lot going on, and he seems to just be, living with his girlfriend who's successful and kind of riding off her coattails. So at the beginning of the story, Dal mentions it's a weeknight, and he says, you know what, Connie, I think I'm going to go catch a horror double feature that's playing at the local theater here. And Connie says, well, hey, can I come with you? Connie, by the way, is a huge movie fan. She used to be addicted to movies and almost needed therapy to get out of it. Now, Dal, being the prick that he is, says, well, I mean, you could come with me, but, I hear it's really gory. It's probably not your kind of thing. The slasher film, by the way, that he's planning on seeing is called Heads You Lose. What a great title for a slasher, right? I mean, Laymon really knew his stuff there. So anyway, Connie kind of senses that, Dal doesn't want her to come along. She's like, okay, he needs his me time. It's probably been a long day at work for him. So she says, you know what, you're probably right. You go on ahead and just go see the movie by yourself. And, right away, the reader's sympathy is with Connie. In fact, in this whole book, she is probably the most sympathetic character. Not that that's saying much, but she's quite a badass as well, I must say. So later in the book, after her boyfriend has left and she's kind of feeling lonely and rejected, she decides to go on a walk. So she goes on a walk. This takes place in L.A., in those dangerous, gritty L.A. streets, according to Laymon. And she gets attacked by a carload of teenage punks. Not only does she defend herself from these teenage punks and subdue them, but she even steals their car, takes it out to an abandoned parking lot, and sets it on fire as she sips a beer. What a badass this girl is. I like her already. Anyway, it turns out that Dal was being a little deceitful. He is actually not planning on seeing a film, as he had said, but what he's planning on doing is meeting up with the hot bombshell chick who he met that day at work, who approached him and gave him her address and said, come to me tonight. Which happens all the time, right? Very realistic. So he is, very excited. He's driving to this mysterious woman named Elizabeth, her house. She lives in some swank neighborhood up in the hills of LA. And so he shows up there. She opens the door wearing this silky diaphanous gown and immediately is all over him and kissing him. And here we get the first of sort of the male wish fulfillment scenes that Laymon loves to write so much. Then she leads him through the mansion and takes him to this dark room in the back of the house that's lit only by the backyard pool. They go onto the bed and start getting it on in typical graphic Laymon fashion. Now, if you've never read Laymon before, the man does like his sex, even more than violence, and you get a lot of sex in this book especially. At one point, after they finish having sex, Dal gets up, decides he needs to use the restroom, and he bumps into some shadowy figure in the doorway. And then the girl, Elizabeth, just casually says, oh, let me get that for you. Gets up and pulls a hunched-over, withered old man in a wheelchair forward and tells Dal, hey, yeah, meet my husband. Yeah, it turns out that Elizabeth, this chick, gets off on having her paralyzed husband watch her perform her sexcapades. Apparently, the husband, according to her, likes to watch as well. So, yeah. Then we meet another couple in this book. We meet a young couple who actually do go to the theater, the local theater in this town. It actually is called the Haunted Palace, and it's run by this creepy guy named... what's the owner of the theater? Well, his moniker is Bruno Blood, and he introduces the features. He likes to wear a nylon a nylon stocking over his head, and he has a fake hatchet dripping with blood. And he introduces the feature, saying that for the next few weeks, they're going to play these double features, and in between each double feature, they're going to play a horror short starring a man named Otto Schreck. That's this new kind of horror character who's going to be in these shorts. And so he tells them that you get to enjoy these shorts in between the main features. And so this young couple, their names are Britt and who is it? It doesn't really matter, right? Britt and Pete. They're watching the first short, starring this character Otto Schreck, who's like in different scenes, like he's different things. Like in this one, he's a vampire, right? This is actually from the synopsis that we got on the back. Now, as the girl, Britt, is watching this scene, she notices that the female actress who's the victim, who's getting killed by the vampire, looks awfully familiar. And then she recognizes, and she looks and she says, "Oh my God, that person looks like my old friend Tina." I mean, not just the physical aspect, but also like the mannerisms as well. And she's really weirded out by this, and it kind of like, and then she tells her boyfriend after the show, like, "Yeah, that girl in the movie looked just like Tina." And her boyfriend, like, says like, "No, you're probably just, overthinking it." Anyway, she tries to get a hold of her friend to like, make sure everything's okay. Can't get a hold of her friend. Her friend lives in this college town, up the coast. So she decides to drive over there. She drives over to see if her friend Tina is okay. The door is answered by a woman named Freya, who is Tina's roommate, who acts very like odd and suspicious right from the get-go, and says, "Oh yeah, you just missed Tina. She was here. You want to come in? Like, she should be back any minute." And she invites Britt into the house and offers Britt some wine, which Britt accepts, and then promptly passes out. She's been drugged by Freya. This is not good news for this woman, Britt, because as it turns out, Freya is in fact a lesbian sociopath who has been supplying a mysterious and sinister local filmmaker with young women to star in his horror shorts, these Otto Schreck horror shorts, which are in fact snuff films. And in fact, they are collecting these women, forcing them to be in these movies, and actually killing them in the process as they film the movies. And, they're not going to get caught, of course, because they like to choose people, women who don't have a lot of close ties, and they always dub over their real voices, okay? So that has, that's kind of what's going on. That's the basic setup here. So this book has a lot of just different plot lines. So, you've got, Dell having this affair with the girl Elizabeth and her paralyzed husband. You've got Connie. You've got these other people. And, for a lot of the time, it doesn't really seem like they connect until the end, at which it does kind of connect, albeit, tenuously. And, it all kind of culminates in an absolutely absurd and ridiculous climax and an ending which is pretty abrupt and slipshod, if I may say so. However, it is fun watching or reading about these Otto Schreck kind of horror shorts, especially when you find out very soon that these are actually real things and they're actually really killing these people in the process of filming them. You also get some dark humor. So, one of my favorites was, so this girl, this Freya, who's this, that's basically supplying the filmmakers with women to use in these snuff films. She keeps getting pestered by this fat and annoying girl who keeps showing up at her apartment trying to rent the room, because she's been advertising a room to rent because her last roommate, Tina, she supplied to these filmmakers and they killed her. So, This woman shows up, and Freya is not interested in her in the slightest, because she's fat and unattractive. She wants like a hot girl, but she needs to find a way to get rid of this girl because she keeps showing up. So she says, "Hey, you know what? Why don't I take you out to dinner? I know a great place up the coast." So she drives this person up to the house where they film these snuff films. It's like this gothic house right off Pacific Coast Highway. And, she says, "Yeah, this is a very exclusive restaurant I'm taking you to." And the girl's like totally like ignorant. And she's like, "Oh, okay, great." And then they show up, and of course there's only one car parked outside. And the girl's like, "I thought this was like a hot restaurant." And then Freya is like, "Oh, it's, it's very exclusive, very, very exclusive. You're very lucky that I'm taking you here." So they go inside and they're seated to dinner. And of course, Otto Schreck, the horror star of these films, shows up as the master chef. He's a world-class chef, and he serves his famous soup to this to this girl. So this poor girl is eating the soup, and she's wondering. She's like, I wonder what kind of meat is in this. Like, what is that? Is it pork? Is it rabbit? And then she notices a shiny toe attached to one of the larger pieces of meat, and quickly realizes that she's eating a human toe. At which point, Otto Schreck shows up with a platter, which he calls, I wrote this down, he brings a platter which he calls face marinara, which he describes as, quote unquote, lightly simmered visage over steaming linguine topped with a delicate tomato sauce. And then you can guess what happens to this fat girl after that. But, things like that make you think, okay, maybe this Fangoria, that Fangoria quote was onto something here, because it's just like so ridiculous and cheesy, right? But, if you like things like that, as I said, a lot of graphic and gratuitous sex in this one. I mean, excessive even for Laymon standards. He really gets off on trying to get the reader off. It's kind of funny. Of course, his classic trademark word rump comes up a lot. If you're a Richard Laymon fan, you'll know that he loves the word rump, referring to a lady's B. And that comes up, and just, I mean, it's funny, like the level of sex. I mean, at certain points, like characters will stop what they're doing. Like it'll literally like suspend the momentum of the plot. They'll stop what they're doing just to have more sex. And, it's just funny. It's just funny. He really enjoyed writing about that. But, this book, I mean, fun, incredibly dumb, very discursive, like a lot of Laymon books. I mean, Laymon was the type of writer who kind of flew by the seat of his pants. You could tell he doesn't really plot things out too much in advance. He kind of just like lets it go and go and go, and then tries like figures out a way to connect it all together. Sometimes it works more satisfactorily than others. So be aware of that. Also, it's very easy in many Laymon books, and in this one especially, to discern things that Laymon feels personally very strong about. So in this one, it is, very evident his staunch support of law enforcement. This is like actually a recurring thing in a lot of his books. He's always supports law enforcement no matter what. Also evident is his distaste of, city bus drivers, whom one of his characters refers to as maniacal madmen. We also get in here his distaste of panhandlers, his distaste for fat people, his distaste for the overpopulation of Los Angeles, and for thugs especially of any kind, particularly Latinos and black people. So definitely problematic in those regards, and I can't say that I see eye to eye with Laymon's political views at all, but at the same time, he did write, as I said, very propulsive and readable page turners, and the man did know how to tell a story, even if it didn't always like come together totally in the end. Just fast-paced fun splatter movies on paper, essentially. So would I recommend this one? If you like this kind of thing, if you like pulp horror, sure, it's fun, it's disposable, you're not gonna, be thinking too hard about it. If you're new to Laymon, I would not suggest starting with this one, but if you're curious about him, I would say probably a good one to start with is Flesh, which is one of his better books, probably one of my favorites of his, and one of his more accessible books as well. I would say Flesh, or if you're in the mood for some 80s cheese, Resurrection Dreams is quite fun as well. But Out Are the Lights, Richard Laymon, he was certainly one of a kind, and he is missed. I do miss him, but no one writes like Laymon, and his books, they're fun. They're fun for what they are. I keep going back to that F word, fun, and here, I think that certainly applies. So, that is Out Are the Lights by Richard Laymon. So, hope you guys enjoyed the review. Stay tuned this month for more movie mayhem. I got more movie-related book reviews and a couple more like special collection videos coming up. So thanks for watching, guys. Take it easy. Peace out.